Well, it was a Sunday morning. It wasn't much different from the ones that had come before it lately. Started out with an early walk through the bush to clear the mind, then a little candle and burnt some incense. I reckon there's something about the scent of musk and vanilla. It just centers the soul. A little bit of meditation, a little gratitude journaling, coffee in hand, and I figured I'd knock out a chapter or two of Break Free. You know what happened next? It wasn't just another writing session. When I first wrote Break Free, I was in a dark place and I was trying to find my way through, and a lot of the words that I scribbled in that old notebook came from a place of survival. They were a strategy, it was a way to keep my head above water. But now life's different and my lens has changed, and the way that I see the world is a little bit different. So typing it out word for word, well, it just didn't sit right. Now this chapter was supposed to be about creating a code of conduct, a way to live life aligned to your values. That's when I hit the brakes, because what if the values that I wrote back then aren't mine anymore? That question, what if those values aren't mine anymore? That's what cracked it open. I thought I was just revisiting some old framework. Instead I found myself questioning everything. Was I still driven by freedom, or was I just scared of getting stuck again? Was I chasing adventure, or was I just trying to outrun the parts of me that hadn't healed yet? Even the idea of contribution, was it pure, or was it about being seen, being useful, or being enough? Every value that I'd written down, I had to hold it up to the light and ask, is this mine? Did I inherit it? Did I absorb it? Or did I build it out of pain? I realised I wasn't just editing a chapter. I was confronting the architecture of my identity. And that's what values really are. They're not just words. They're the scaffolding that we hang our choices from, and the stories that we build our lives around. Now this wasn't about becoming somebody new. It was about remembering who I was before the world taught me to forget. Values just aren't what you believe. They're how you behave when life tests you. And life, well, it's tested me plenty. It's one thing to know your values, but it's another thing altogether to actually live them, especially when life punches you in the guts. Most of us think we know what we stand for, but what about when the heat's on, when life gives you a good old slap in the face when you hit rock bottom? Because we don't rise to our values, we fall back on our personal standards. And if you haven't set those values clearly, well, you're pretty much fucked. And that's where a personal code of conduct comes in. Think of it like this, that your values are your why and your code is your how. So there's a funny thing about values, and one would think that our actions are driven by our values, but it's actually the other way around. It's actually that our actions dictate our values. So having a code of conduct just allows us to have a set of rules in place which causes us to act in line with our values. But what are your values? Have you ever sat down and truly worked out what they are? Because I reckon most people probably haven't. There's another really important question to ask you, is that once you have got a handle on your values, are those values in line with the person that you want to be? Because sometimes the values that we have today aren't the values that we need to get to where we're going. And values can also be in conflict with one another. So if you value freedom and adventure really, really highly, but you also have a value for stability, for security, sometimes those values can really, really be in conflict with one another. And this is where sitting down to work out what my values were, looking at what my values were when I wrote Break Free originally, and what my values need to be to get me to where I'm going. And yeah, it took me down the rabbit hole. Now, one thing that I've really tried hard to do with turning Break Free into a book for the world to see is to make sure that it's still relevant. And because it will be a framework for people to work through their own obstacles and their own challenges, I wanted to make sure that everything that I wrote in there held water. So part of that process was to not just type it out word for word, but to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, because as I said, I wrote that book in the dark. I'm sitting in the light now, and it gives me a different lens to look at what I wrote. So seeing it from different perspectives, I think, is really valuable.
I stand upon my desk to remind myself that we must constantly look at things in a different way. See, the world looks very different from up here. You don't believe me? Come see for yourselves. Come on. Come on. Just when you think you know something, you have to look at it in another way. Even though it may seem silly or wrong, you must try. Now, when you read, don't just consider what the author thinks. Consider what you think.
Valuable.
Boys, you...
But also testing the theory. So whilst I'm writing the book, I'm also reliving the book, and I'm testing the book, and I'm going through and doing all the exercises again that I did way back then, all the exercises that I'm going to have in there for people that are on this journey to use. And that has really been enlightening. Well, the first thing that I had to do was work out what my values were, get some real clarity around them, what they are right now. The second thing I had to do was work out what my values needed to be the person I need to be. To put this whole thing together, to build Project Kensei, to get this book out there and make this book the best that it can be, to launch the Till the Fat Lady Sings podcast. There's a heck of a lot of stuff. And I think there's probably a little bit of a values gap between me now and me who I need to be to pull this all together. So there was a really, really big exercise around that. But what I discovered pretty quickly, and as I sat down to write it in the original Break Free, the old notebook, this is one chapter called Creating a Code of Conduct. It turned out to be in the new Break Free, the Break Free that you guys are going to have in your hand, hopefully sooner rather than later. It turned out to be 4 full chapters. It made me realise that there is a heck of a lot about values, and values play a really important role in being the best you, or the best me, that we can be. And it also made me realise that Break Free is really a book all about values. It's a book about values, but it's also a book about questions. So right now you might be wondering, what if you don't know what your values are? Well, look, here's a clue. Have a look what pisses you off. Have a look what breaks your heart and what makes you say, you know, that ain't okay. Chances are behind every frustration, there's a value that's being challenged. If you hate liars, maybe honesty is a core value. If you feel sick when people are silenced, it might be truth or freedom. If you can't stand injustice, well, you're probably wired for integrity or contribution. Now, I know my own journey didn't stop at listing words on a page. It pulled me down into a rabbit hole of psychology, philosophy, and hard-won lived experiences. I read Manson. I studied Tony Robbins. I found Aristotle's golden mean, Drabowski's positive disintegration, and I realised that this stuff, well, you know, it's not just personal development fluff. Values shapes beliefs. Beliefs shape choices. And choices, well, they shape your identity. It all loops back. We had a look at Schwartz's value wheel and mapped out the trade-offs, because every value, well, it's going to cost you something. You want freedom? It's going to cost you comfort. If you want security, well, it might cost you risk. If you want growth, say goodbye to ease. The point, well, it's not to pick the right values. It's to pick the ones that you're willing to live with and live by. You know, the quality of your values determines the quality of your problems. And the quality of your problems, well, that determines the quality of your life. What I'm building here, it's not just a bunch of content. It's an ecosystem of possibilities. Break free is the manual, the raw truth and the lessons learned. Project Kensei, well, that's the dojo. That's where you show up, do the work and sharpen the blade. Until the fat lady sings, that's the proof that it's not over until you say it is. Because age, failure, setbacks, none of them get to decide where your story ends. You do.